Welcome back to Hardware Unboxed. It is time for part 1, June Q&A. So you guys have asked us some questions and hopefully we'll have some answers for you. But before we do, today's sponsor spot is brought to you by Antec and their Performance 1 Full Tower eATX case. Designed to support the latest RTX 40 series graphics cards up to 400mm long, the P1 is big on the inside with loads of options for top and front mounted radiators, including the ability to support dual 360mm rads simultaneously. The P1 comes with 4 pre-installed Storm T3 PWM fans with the ability to expand fan support to additional 6. It also includes a temperature display, dual 4mm tempered glass side panels, cable management covers complete with Velcro straps for quick and easy cable management. So for more information, please check the link in the video description. How would you describe the term optimized in relation to video games? So video game optimization, what would you describe that as?
I feel this comes up like optimization's a buzzword at the moment, and it seems to go through phases of it becoming a buzzword or not, depending on the state of games. I think it's sometimes used for games that can't run ultra settings on mid-range GPUs, which I've never really thought of as an optimization thing. I always think optimization is like how well it can scale across a range of hardware. Like, does it look really good on your high-end products, but then can you turn down the settings to an acceptable level, still get good performance on mid-range, and then does it actually run at all on like entry-level products? Because there are some games where even at 1080p you may only be getting 30 FPS on an entry-level product, but then there's games that run still quite well on those cards. So yeah, to me, I think if there's a good range of scaling between high-end to low-end, especially for modern stuff that people still have, then to me that's a game that would be well optimized. But if it's got like CPU stuttering issues or as I said, you turn down the quality and performance still isn't very good on those low-end cards, then that's what would trigger me to sort of say it's not well optimized. But I feel people have a very different definition of that. Like, yeah,
it's a tough one because a whole host of reasons I'm sure we're about to get into. I made the mistake of saying the performance scaling I was seeing in The Last of Us Part 1 appeared optimized, like without looking at the visual component, because I wasn't looking at the visual component at all. I mean, I did it for ultra quality settings and we both agreed the game looked, even upon initial delivery, maxed out. The game looked quite good. Lots of detail. It was a good looking game. Problem was when you lowered the texture quality, it looked like absolute garbage. But that wasn't what I was talking about. I was talking about more the fact that when you lower to even like the medium quality preset, you're getting really good performance on basically anything.
Yep.
So in the FPS performance sense, it was quite well optimized for scaling, but yeah, the visual presentation lacked polish on those lower quality settings. So it wasn't outright well optimized.
Yeah, like I think that for it to be overall well optimized, both things need to go hand in hand. Like you can't just have a game where they're targeting low end GPUs and they're like, well, let's just make the game look like us, right? Like it's got to actually have, it's got to match, the visuals have to match the performance and sort of fair. Has to scale to a reasonable level in that sense as well. But yeah, I mean, I feel like, and this may be sort of a controversial opinion, but there were maybe a decade ago, a lot more badly optimized games without very good scaling at all. Like there used to be games with like no or very few quality settings. It feels like even today, a lot of PC ports, so to speak, have at least a reasonable range of quality settings.
Yeah, we've talked about this before. Like back when I first started doing big, GPU benchmarks in games, which was probably about 15 years ago now. So often we came up against games where like VSync was locked on and couldn't be turned off. Like it had a hard, back then it was 60 FPS basically. Full screen mode didn't work, or so many weird, silly little things that you think would be like the first thing to get working on PC just didn't work. We see a lot less of that now.
Yeah, unfortunately, sort of, while that's died away, other issues have come up, like traversal starter, CPU issues. I think a lot of the issues that we're going to be seeing with upcoming games are going to be more related to like CPU optimization and how that's being used. There are games that I think on consoles will probably be targeting 30 FPS. We've seen like Starfield as one example that targets 30 FPS. And, I think there will be some of those games that are not going to run super well on PC. Like they probably will get more than 30 FPS, but
I hope so.
The GPUs, there's a massive range of performance, right? Like between a low-end card from a few years ago to a 4090, a 4090 could be 3, 4, 5 times faster plus. Whereas on the CPU side, compared to like a Zen 2 CPU to now, performance is what, like doubled maybe in a more like sort of optimistic perspective. So I think, yeah, as games sort of start to use the CPU more, there's going to be, I don't know, more cries of optimization issues. And then it's going to be coming down to sort of looking at those games and saying, well, what are they using the CPU for? Is it sort of, are those CPU utilization, is it justified? And I think it's much harder to determine whether CPU utilization is justified compared to GPU. Like you can sort of see when visuals get better, but on the CPU front, I think it's more difficult. So
yeah, it's a tough. So basically what we're saying is game optimization is as bad as it's ever been. We're not saying it's better than it used to be or worse. We think it's always been problematic for different reasons. So we think it's just as shambles as it's always been.
Yeah, pretty much.
And then, you raised some good points about the CPU. Like, if a game heavily uses a CPU, then people will be like, this is unjustified. Like, why does it require, like, 8 cores, let's say? It shouldn't be using it. But then if you get it where, the frame rate's not as good as you'd like it to be and it's only, utilizing 1 core of the CPU or the CPU lightly, then people will call for more CPU utilization. So that's a tough one, but...
Yeah, it can be difficult to do that as well. Like it's not as simple as checking the multi-thread checkbox in the game engine. It's
optimization's a tough one because again, like with The Last of Us Part 1, I think it's in a pretty good spot right now. And again, like the ultra quality settings, especially at 1440p, you do need more than 8 gigabytes of VRAM. So some people will say, it doesn't look good enough to require that much VRAM. I think the level of detail is really impressive. I think the texture quality is very impressive. And of course, you can now dial it down and play it on 8 gigabyte cards. But can you play it on a 4 gigabyte card at like medium?
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously going to be limits
so
to how.
Yeah,
like, does that count for good optimization if it doesn't work on a 4 gig card?
That's what I'm sort of getting at. Like, should low work on a 1 gig card? Like, where's not that we have those anymore, but. And it's the same thing, like, does it work on a dual-core CPU? So what's the CPU optimization? It's weird. I guess what I'm getting at is it's weird where, like, we have these mental barriers with gamers where it's like, this game must look amazing and work on an 8 gigabyte card.
Yeah.
Why is that still a thing in 2023? Like, why can't it? I get that you want it to work using, say, medium on an 8 gigabyte card and look, as good as you'd expect previous games to look or thereabouts. Yeah, why can't we have games now when you use the ultra quality settings at 1080p that they may require 10 gigabytes of VRAM?
Yeah, or just more powerful GPUs.
Yep.
I mean, I think part of this comes down to the thing we've talked about in the past about how gamers always want ultra. And a lot of that plays into like the setting presets and almost an optimization discussion because, developers choose the names for each of the quality settings and no one wants to use low settings, right?
Well, especially...
But low could still look pretty good.
Yeah, I think part of that, the mental game there comes into how much you spent on your GPU as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's part of it.
If you just spent $400 US on your GPU, you're probably wanting to be higher sort of a minimum or thereabouts.
Which I think is fair for sure. But I think it also comes down to like what developers are choosing to call things like low and medium. There are some games where your medium settings may be equivalent to like a high or ultra in another game. So I think part of it is like, with optimization, developers also have to think really carefully about where they're sort of placing those names and using things like, high can maybe be more of a medium and, you can have extreme level settings that are sort of above ultra, which I think people are sort of less likely to turn on and to cripple performance and affect things like optimization. So if there was a game like The Last of Us Part 1 where Ultra was renamed to Extreme and High was renamed to Ultra, then I think there would be a lot more people playing the game and feeling happy about playing on Ultra settings if Extreme was more for those, 12 gig GPUs, 16 gig GPUs. So, I think that plays, like, as much as it's silly to sort of say, well, the name makes a lot of difference because the presets are still exactly the same, but part of that...
well, we've seen that with graphics card names, for
exactly.
example. So that makes a lot of sense. But anyway, we should probably move on because I've noticed even though there's a lot to talk about here and we could keep talking about different angles, when we talk about a question for too long, there's a certain subset of viewers that get very triggered that we spent so much time having fun, having a conversation. Because that's what it is. It's a conversation with Tim and I. It's not just like giving you a yes or no answer. But anyway, I think we've covered it probably enough. So not to upset those people, Tim.
Let's move on
to the next one.
How is it that CPUs, memory, storage, and even motherboards are starting to hit fire sale pricing, yet GPUs are barely budging? it seems these other examples indicate inflation and fabrication costs are not an excuse.
I mean, we've always said that inflation's a factor, but it's not the reason why you're paying double or more than double for graphics cards.
No.
You know, I see people in the comments going, I can't believe these guys don't understand the economics of the situation. You know, they don't even consider inflation. It's like, well, we consider it. We just don't quite weigh as heavily as you are on it. Like, look, it's a factor for sure. Manufacturing costs are also going up. So there are factors that are increasing the price. But yeah, you can't have record margins and cry inflation.
Yeah, and I think the fire sale angle is, modern GPUs like the current generation, not seeing too many fire sales, but certainly on previous generation GPUs, there have been some very good discounts on those products.
Yeah,
they're trying to run them out the door, which I think matches up with motherboard storage. Like a lot of the deals that we're seeing on like SSDs, for example, they're not your PCI 5.0 brand new cutting edge SSDs. They're like the older, cheaper models, which they can make more efficiently, and they're just sort of slashing the price on that. We've seen the price slashed for like the RTX 3060, like overnight, basically, from like 330 to like 270. I think it's like almost 250 now for that.
It's simple supply and demand, right? So the last few years, there's been a demand for any GPU that was a GPU, because cryptocurrency mining farms, they were getting all the premium, most power efficient stuff. And then anyone else who wanted to get into mining was trying to buy up anything, like no matter what it was. If it had enough VRAM, didn't really matter as long as you could turn a profit on it. So the demand for graphics cards was through the roof and far outweighed the supply. We don't have that problem anymore, but you know, the new buzzword AI, that's a lot of new silicon allocation is going towards that. And they're not as interested in the older used GPUs. So that's why we're seeing a drop on that market. But the new current generation stuff isn't moving that much because there's limited supply of that because the silicon's been focused towards AI type hardware. So it's just a supply and demand thing. All right, what do you guys think of the early RTX 4060 preview videos where Nvidia only allowed reviewers to test Cyberpunk 2077 using the RT Ultra preset? I think that was with and without DLSS 2 and 3.
Yes. So we were approached by Nvidia asking us if we wanted to participate in this early preview process sort of thing. So
it was at least a couple of days before it was set to go out.
Yeah, so we got this email saying, hey, you can test the RTX 4060 under these conditions. Here's the list of things you can do. You can't do all these other things like, for example, show the card, show power, show performance in other titles, etc. List of limitations, list of things we can do before the review embargo goes live, which I believe when this video is going out, it should be very soon that you'll be able to see performance reviews. So sort of that early preview sort of thing. And yeah, this, I guess it isn't really the first time Nvidia has done this with their products. It's a bit unusual to see it for a more mainstream entry-level slash, it really is a mid-range product, but you know, these days. Usually they've reserved this sort of thing for higher end models, like we have seen the 8K gaming situation a few years ago, where people were allowed to preview whatever model it was. I can't remember at this point. Playing at 8K, we've seen. I
think it was a 3090 at 8K, but go on.
Yeah, there were some other previews with certain outlets, you know, only allowed to show a very specific curated selection of games.
A very specific best case scenario.
Yeah, best case scenario, percentage difference type things as opposed to raw FPS numbers. And yeah, so this isn't like we're sitting here being like, oh my God, Nvidia's done this really weird thing. They seem to be interested in showing these sort of favorable test conditions prior to reviews to sort of, I guess, set the narrative in one particular way ahead of reviews. So that seems to be the ploy here. And yeah, it's odd for a mid-range card. I guess they're sort of worried about sales or something.
It is a little bit. I think part of it would be the fact that, like the RTX 4060 Ti, I think Nvidia was genuinely shocked by how universally destroyed that product was.
Yes.
Like, I think, I think they probably think, Harbor Unboxed, Gamers Nexus, those guys will be pretty critical probably, or maybe not as critical as they ended up being, but they sort of expect a fairly independent critical analysis, let's say, from us. Other reviewers maybe not so much potentially, I don't know. But I think it's fair to say that it was very hard to find a positive 4060 Ti review. I think there was maybe 2 that I saw out of the dozens upon dozens upon dozens that I watched and read. So that product got destroyed, I think is safe to say. I think that's an opinion that pretty much everyone could agree with. And I think they thought, well, we really need this $300 model to be popular and sell well. We need the mainstream to really adopt this card, and how we're going to go about doing that. And I think setting a really positive narrative or a really positive spin on the product before it's released, that will sort of sit with people. So basically, you were allowed to test at 1080p and 1080p only using the Ultra RT preset, and that was it. So 1080p, Ultra RT, and then you could test no upscaling, DLSS 2, whatever quality setting you wanted, and then frame generation, DLSS 3. So I think native rendering with the Ultra RT preset, you're looking at about 25 FPS thereabouts. And then with DLSS enabled, I think that gets you at about 50. So DLSS 2 quality, about 50 FPS. And then with frame generation, 80 to 90 FPS. So it's not exactly stellar performance, but it is playable. And I think they're trying to set the narrative that this card is more capable than you think in this really specific best case scenario, and hope that people extrapolate and generalize and think that it's the 4060 is a 1080p Ultra RT card, which not sure what to say about that one, but I think that's what they were trying to get ahead of what they perceived as probably being largely negative reviews, because and also set the tone for reviewers. Like, it's hard to really dunk on this card and say it doesn't have enough VRAM or it's too expensive if it can play Cyberpunk at 90 FPS with, just about max ray tracing quality settings.
Yeah, I mean, that's clearly the plan. And I mean, I guess what do you really say to that? I mean, first of all, it's nice to show a best case scenario or close to best case scenario, but
I'd say it's best case, but yeah.
It's kind of useless is probably the best way to describe it, because, Nvidia is only ever in these situations where it's an early preview going to show favorable information. They're not going to come out and allow reviewers ahead of reviews to ever show a configuration which is not favorable to the card. Like, they're not going to show something where you run into VRAM limitations. They're not going to allow you to run a ray traced game. Like, if the goal was to say this card can do ray tracing, they're not going to give people access to a game where the 4060 cannot actually play with ray tracing enabled. So when you sort of factor that in, we're already running into problems with this testing. And then further to that, it's like, how useful is seeing a best case scenario? As a buyer, you want to see some best case scenarios. You want to see how good can this be, but also, I think more importantly, you want to see where's the limitations for this product. Like, if I want to do certain things, where is the limit? And so our full review, which will be coming up shortly, you will see where the limits lie for the product. Whereas this early testing is really, you don't really get any idea of that. And so, yeah, this sort of thing I've always thought is, just pointless. Like, I get there's a point from an Nvidia standpoint, but from a consumer standpoint, there's no value to that sort of testing. Yeah,
you're right on the limit with VRAM usage for a start. Like, you're right on, it's like you're talking hundreds of megabytes you've got of wriggle room under those quality settings on an 8GB card. You go to 1440p, you blow past that, you'll see constant frame stuttering and stuff like that, and the experience sort of goes downhill quickly. Really, the best way to summarize this is what it is it's what Nvidia would make themselves as a promo video or a PR slide type thing. And what they're doing is they're like, here's the criteria, the test settings we would use for our marketing slide. We would now like you, Gamers Nexus, Harbor Unboxed, Linus Tech Tips, Digital Foundry, whoever it is, we would like you to put your name to this test method and push it out there as being, like, hey, look what the 4060 can do. So they're basically getting us to do their dirty work for them, is what they're trying to do by showing a best case scenario and a best case scenario only.
Yeah, I mean, we're always about independent testing, and there are certainly a lot of outlets out there as well who are very much focused on independent testing. I think, how often do you hear in like a Gamers Nexus review about that? This is our testing, our methodologies, and we're certainly all about that as well. We think that's the best way of going about it. And when you're limited in any way from showing the performance that you want to show and the things that you want to show in your reviews, it's no longer independent. And that's basically where the limits lie and that sort of thing. I don't necessarily blame reviewers who've gone out and done this sort of testing, because there is that opportunity there to have a video or an article that gets lots of views. If you're trying to make a name for yourself in the industry and you want people to look at your content, then having these sort of exclusive preview things is one way of going about it. And yeah, all the power to people who want to do that sort of thing. And so long as, hopefully people, I haven't watched all of the videos, but I'm sure there are some people that have framed the content in the way that's sort of explaining the limitations and the things Nvidia are and aren't allowing people to do. But for our audience, where we're very much about independent analysis, testing the way that we think is the best way of testing, having this long list of things that you can't do, it's not, it destroys the value of the content in our opinion. So
yep, we'll probably put up on screen some of the requirements there. But yeah, basically, it didn't allow us any real wiggle room to give you the full or even partial context that you were required there to make a purchasing decision. So again, Nvidia came to us. They said it was an exclusive thing for a select amount of media, a small group of media. We were included, which, thanks Nvidia for including us. But
I think we do have to give Nvidia credit there, because the previous two times that they've done this that I can remember, it's been much more select, and we were not included. Yep. So
they were paid for sponsor spots, I think, the 8K things. Yeah,
were they?
I think so. I don't know. I shouldn't say because I can't recall exactly. I think some of them were. Anyway, they were definitely a lot more exclusive than...
Nvidia just gave us heads up on this. I don't think they were expecting us to make a video.
Well, we were interested in the details because we might have, but it turned out that it just wasn't workable. So,
yeah, and I definitely appreciate Nvidia giving us that heads up. I think personally I prefer if they didn't do this, but I think as well...
Not the heads up, the whole thing, period, is what you're saying.
What?
You appreciate the heads up.
I appreciate it, but I would prefer if they weren't doing this exclusive preview content.
Yep.
But at the same time, I think people these days are very clued in. Like, as far as what I see from like the YouTube audience, the Reddit audience, people in like enthusiast forums and places like that, people are very clued into this sort of strategy now. Like, I think previously when Nvidia sort of started doing this, there was a bit of people more believed that the testing was closer to what might have been like a final realistic result as opposed to just the best case. But I think these days people are much more aware that when a company gives you a certain outline of stuff that you're allowed to cover and excluding a whole bunch of things, that testing is probably not representative, and to still wait for the reviews. I don't think this is going to have any real impact on reviews or potentially even sales. Nvidia has already been quite clear about the performance of their card in their own performance slides. So people already have sort of an idea of the ballpark to expect from sort of their best case scenario testing. So with all those things sort of out in the open, and again, there are review programs and review systems where the card just launches and Nvidia doesn't tell you about performance at all ahead of time. I think the 4070 was that, just sort of appeared without a pre-announcement. So, Nvidia's gone much more, above and beyond with this sort of the 4060 series in terms of giving people more information about the card ahead of release. But people are sort of, like I said, they're very aware. Reviews are still going to give you the full picture on that product. And yeah, I don't know. Will they keep doing this in the future? Probably. But it just depends, I guess, on the value of that sort of thing.
All right. After seeing what you saw at Computex in the AI processing space, taking up more and more of the wafer supply, like ByteDance's recent $1 billion deal with Nvidia, what do you think of Linus's recent WAN show, musing that Nvidia could eventually spin off GeForce as a separate company to decouple its margins from the rest of Nvidia and allow for better consumer pricing? Wow, that didn't make sense.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because I sort of get where the idea comes from, as in like you've got executives at Nvidia who are thinking, oh, we need to make the most money and have the biggest margins, so we're going to focus on AI and not focus on gaming. So the idea would be you split it off, Nvidia can focus on AI, and then you get this new group of executives in charge of GeForce who then focus on gaming. So then maybe the margins would be different and they can compete more.
I'm not following.
But I don't think that would work from a couple of standpoints. First of all, even if the companies are split, they'd still be
Same objective, right?
They're sort of
They're still company,
split, but they're still part of the same company, so they're going to have the same corporate philosophy. So it's not like they'll split off GeForce and they'll be like, well, we're now comfortable with a 40% margin instead of a 60% margin.
AMD's not even doing that.
Yeah, they've still got a big margin, don't they?
Well, they're doing the same thing. And they're just like, they're following the Nvidia pricing strategy.
Yeah, so
Like,
I think
they're not. It's not like AMD, the Radeon Technologies Group's going, oh, let's offer, the similar performance to what our competitors offering at a significantly discounted price. They're like, let's make a GPU, see where that slots in with our competitor, and knock 10% off.
Yep.
That's what they've been doing for 2 generations. Well, a while.
You'd split off GeForce in this new company, and it would still be a dominant player. They'd still have dominant market share and sales. So what would the incentive be for them to change anything that they're doing?
Yeah, and they're still competing for the same resource, though, wafers.
As well, yeah.
So it doesn't...
So yeah, the AI deals, like occupying space and making more margins, there'd still be the incentive for them to outprice in terms of buying the wafers. An AI deal would outprice a gaming product to buy wafer supply. So it's not going to impact that.
Unless you can make the same or better margins. They're going wherever the margins are.
Yeah.
So they can much more easily sell larger margins to professional, users. It's always been the way.
And servers and all that sort of thing.
So
yeah, TSMC is always going to have the incentive to sell to servers and sell to big margin.
Yeah, well, it's the same with AMD. If the server market would eat up every single last CPU they could possibly produce, like a cryptocurrency mining thing, but for CPUs, desktop CPUs would be almost non-existent, and the ones that did exist would cost a fortune.
Yep. So I think splitting off GeForce,
won't change anything.
It's not really going to change anything. I think it could work if Nvidia somehow wasn't a dominant player, like they're sort of focusing on AI, and then they had this struggling gaming division that needed to change it up and
or if they
do things differently.
If they needed to better compete with AMD or something like that.
But that's not the case. So splitting off, if they split GeForce off, they would operate it in exactly the same way. I don't think there would be any incentive. They've got 70 to 90% market share or something. What incentive would there be to do anything? There's just no incentive. That ignoring the wafer supply thing, that's the number one thing I would go to, is there's just, when you're dominant and you're doing things and you're selling products, and they're not selling heaps of products right now, but they're still outselling their competitors.
Yep.
There's no incentive to do anything.
No, the only way GPUs get a lot cheaper from Nvidia is if
there's competition.
Yeah, well, in that, not only in the gaming industry, but they can't sell the silicon. They've got to sell it. So if they're not selling to AI, they're not selling to professional use space, and they want to target gamers, then you'll see GPU prices plummet, and they'll aggressively pursue that market. But they're just not interested in doing that right now. So anyway, okay, hitting pause there. Part 1 done. Hopefully that was acceptable. Hopefully they enjoyed that, Tim.
Acceptable. We set high standards for ourselves here at Hardware Unboxed.
I'm just going for acceptable on this
acceptable.
one. Yeah, part 2 I want to be stellar.
Stellar. Okay, we'll have to put all the good questions in part 2. So stay tuned for that on the channel. Maybe subscribe. I don't know.
It'd be worth subscribing to this acceptable one to see the stellar version coming.
Well, especially if you've made it the whole way through the only acceptable episode, then it's sort of like, well, you've put up with that then.
You're that heavily invested now. Yep. It's like, you're halfway through a bad TV series. You've got to finish it.
Yeah.
Cool. Yep. All right, thanks for watching. I'm your host, Steve.
I'm your host, Tim.
See you next time.